Now let's understand. I started the recording. So any questions in the previous session, guys? I see that we are taking this, we took this particular scenario for a couple of days, more than 5 days, if I'm not wrong. And this will be the last day for talking about this, specifically on this scenario. And tomorrow I'm going to take you uh, into a Terraform scenario where we are going to deploy this entire infrastructure which we have built uh, right now for this scenario. There is a database, there is what you say, AKS cluster and all that. So we'll try to build this entire scenario using Terraform in the upcoming classes. But uh, any questions during this deployment phase and all that, the troubleshooting which we have done and all. So let me explain one by one. So one of the good things here is in this Azure demo generator, they have even developed what kind of what do you say task would be there and how they would have been set it up. So you can have a look at it. Even this is the first time I'm just having a look at it. Hopefully we might have dashboards also. Let me check. Okay. So if I go into the Azure repository, and if you can have, if you're having a look at this, now this is where the actual code resides. And now if you see, these are all microservices. MyHealth.api is a microservice. How am I saying it? It's an ASP.NET uh, .NET Core web application. And if you see, this is here as a API.cs project, C sharp project. And that's one project. There's nothing but one service entirely. And there is one more CS project, which is data. So everyone services are running as microservices. And here, if you see, we will finally have when there are these many applications with CS pros, you will have .sln file here. Yeah, so it's a solution file. SLN file is solution file, which combines all the CS pros. So solution file will ensure that when you are building an application, you don't need to give entire one by one service. You go and specifically in mention, you'll say build SLN solution file, and it will go and uh, look for all the dependencies and the updates of whatever applications, and it accordingly builds in that DLL files for the applications. And here, whatever you see, the rest of the ones are actually some are being consumed for the Azure things. And if you see here, Azure hyphen pipelines, so whatever we have tried building this this one, if I go and click on edit pipeline, whatever tasks which you see are the same which you will be seeing here. So we can write in YAML code. What is the advantage of using YAML code? You can copy this and utilize it somewhere wherever you need it without any troubles. Okay, so that's where YAML comes. But right now, everyone got acquainted with uh, how do you say, got acquainted with how the pipeline works. So they are because what do you say, the extra parts which you see there in terms of param arguments which we have to select or the respective inputs we have to provide for the task to run in YAML pipeline, that's a bit more easier because only those are the ones which you are mentioning. The rest we are leaving as it is. We are not even touching that. So this makes our job easier and all that. So if I go ahead, and talk about the Azure ML pipelines. And if you see this, replace token is one of the tasks. And the next one is, uh, if you go and look at this Docker Compose here, this is nothing but the run services, and that's what you're seeing here, and build services. So just giving an idea how YAML looks like. And even if you can go and select this, you'll see view YAML, and that's nothing but what you see here. Docker Compose, if it is run services, I go for run services. If you can see here, inputs, Azure subscription, Azure Container Registry, there it is. Then Azure the Docker Compose file, there it is. Action, run services, detached pods. So these are the things which you are seeing the same thing. So whatever you can see here, you can write, you can make it as a view YAML and write it. See, mostly it will put it in right way of YAMLs, but sometimes in when you're trying to come, you click on it and as a view as YAML, sometimes like 50, 100 times, you some 5 times, you will get an incorrect HTML. No, some input might be missing. So that time you have to troubleshoot based on the pipelines. Any questions here? So the interview questions which you will get here is, what is a step? What is a task? Okay. Or they will say that there are few tasks which I have. There is run services, there are build services, there are push services, tasks in a pipeline. What should I be doing when I'm writing in YAML? So you're saying that you're going to say that. So I'm going to mention steps. In steps, I'll define each of the tasks. So task one is about replacing the token, then I'll do that. Task two is about running the Docker Compose, I'll do that. Task three is about building the Docker files, I'll do that. Now task four is about pushing that. So if you see that is, so first they'll give tasks, and the indentation is very, sorry, not the spacing, which you see here is very important, guys. Otherwise, it just doesn't understand. Okay, so here steps, you set task and then mention the task name, replace the task name. And here, what do you see here is nothing but when you look for task names in, what do you say, in the marketplace, you will, whatever are there from the Azure DevOps tasks, those things. So here you are trying to say that replace tokens. Replace tokens is a task which will uh, take from a text file and convert in the text file whatever variables. So there are variable values which we are using. So we take a text file and whatever variables are mentioned in that, that will be replaced with the values of that variables. So normally in pipeline we can utilize by default here mentioning dollar in square in circular brackets, we are mentioning the variable name and all that. That is okay. But if into a text file, going and converting that text file inside that as variables, whichever you find, making that as values is kind of, you need a specific automation task, and that's where Azure DevOps came saying that utilize a replace tokens task. And that's why you're seeing replace tokens. But why do we see 3 and 4? The 3 and 4 is for versions task. There are different, there'll be updated versions which came in, and that's what is the updated version. So if I look at view tasks, and here, see task 5, that's 5. So even this is in task version 5. So if I click on here, you will see 5 only. Then here it is mentioned as 3. What should I do? Then you have to accordingly change it. Or see, once you're running YAML pipelines, you will definitely, what it works here, some things might not be working properly. So accordingly, you have to keep changing the versions and try to do things. But here, if you see Docker Compose, it's of the same version, 0.0 and all that. Okay. So copy. So these are the task names. So you usually mention there that. So I'll give it my tasks, steps, and then I'll say tasks and task, and then I'll give it task name. So what exactly am I looking for? Am I looking for Docker Compose? Am I looking for replace tokens? Am I looking for copy files? Am I looking for build artifact? Am I looking for .NET? Am I looking for Terraform installer? I'm looking for CLI. So that's how you have to explain when you're giving the answer, guys. And the next one is here. They'll say that, okay, the pipeline should be triggered whenever there is any changes in the specific branch. Now, where do we put it? In terms of here in this one, we mentioned it here that master and the specific branch wherever we are selecting from whichever repository, and then we go into a trigger and say enable continuous integration trigger. So this will help us whenever there is any changes, automatically the pipeline will be triggered to execute run it. Now how do we mention the same thing in uh, Azure pipelines? You will mention here with the word called trigger and say which branch it is. Opposite, obviously, this YAML file should be stored in the repository. So you need to mention which repository and all that. So you are storing in one repository, in that repository, which branch you are mentioning as a trigger, automatically it will go and make change trigger whenever there's any changes in it. Now, the next one in pipeline which we need is uh, what is the agent pool which I have to pick when I'm running the task. And that one you can see here is VM image Ubuntu latest. Okay, so means you are choosing the you can give a pool name and all that. So how do I get to search regarding YAMLs? So Azure DevOps YAML pipeline, and then you mention here pool name. There we go. Here the specific we're talking about is a pool definition. So here you're going to mention pool. There we go. Pool name is name of the pool. And if you have any demands like the previous session, the previous one in release pipelines, if I'm not wrong, this one. Release pipelines, I click on edit. And if I go into this two jobs, one job they're saying demand is SQL package. Now do I mention that is also they mentioned how do you that is what is nothing but the demands. Hmm? And along with demands, they mentioned what image name if you wanted to VM image. If there is any specifically VM image, you are saying that it should be a Microsoft, not if it is only for Microsoft hosted agents, that I'll get to back. Okay, I'll get back to that one later. Uh, we only prefer based on what agent pool. So if it is a Salesforce agent, we won't be needing VM image, guys. Just giving you that information. So this is how we look at it. So if you are trying to get a grip on how the uh, pipeline options are and all that, you will start or linking that in terms of Azure DevOps YAML pipelines. How do I go and work on it? So regarding jobs, what if you having multiple jobs? How do you write it? Here you're mentioning in a job, you're mentioning uh, how do you write multiple jobs. So this is one job. So if you see here, we have two jobs. One is DB deployment, one is AKS deployment. In one job, we have a task. Here in this job, we have two tasks. So it's like one job, you're going to mention steps, and then the task is execute SQL that task. The other one job, you have AKS deployment, and you have to mention steps and then again task. How do we mention a YAML pipeline with two jobs? So you're going to write here first job. So you're going to first mention jobs and then hyphen job. Then you're going to mention DB deployment, and in the steps, that is where you start writing in steps the task, and then you start doing it. Okay. So this is it. This you will mm, as you keep going on, you'll understand how a YAML pipeline works. So these are the common questions which you will get. And so if they ask you, are you aware of YAML pipeline? Yes, you can say that. First, you can tell that I prefer first building with classic editor. Then I'll start making it as view. I'll click on the view YAML and I'll get the YAML script and I will put it in the format point of view. So we have already the templates will be like the trigger. First, we'll mention the trigger from which pipeline we are, which branch we wanted to trigger this pull and all that. Now from which pool, agent pool I have to take agents. So I'll mention the pool name and then I'll mention if there are any agent demands. And if it's a Microsoft hosted agent pool, then I'll mention the VM image. Otherwise, I'll just leave it as if it is self-hosted image, self-hosted agents. And self-hosted agents are my used in my company, so I don't use VM image. Now, if I have multiple jobs in my pipeline, then I will first mention the job names, and even in jobs, you will definitely have again agents. So if you just look at each of this agent job, you have a chance to choose which agents you wanted to run this job. So you can run in one agent for this, and you can run one in one agent for this. So you can go ahead and mention how those things are. So if you see here, the display name depends on condition, continue and error. So what is this thing? Uh, So you'll give you questions like, I have a specific set of tasks. If there are any issues in it, still I want the pipeline to run. Then you'll say that is mentioned continue on error. Okay. This I have four jobs. I have to ensure that only this job should be running only in specific condition. Then you will say you mention on condition. Okay. Depends on what is depends on it will depend on some other job before it is running. So that's what I say. Any jobs must complete before this one. Whatever job has been mentioned, that job has to be completed and timeout in minutes. So uh, wait for this job to complete before the server kills it. Uh, so it's still running. Sometimes the pipeline will get stuck in terms of running. Now, how many for minutes you want it to run? So you can mention here 180. Usually we'll mention 180 minutes and all that, which is nothing but 3 hours. Sometimes you can prefer for 120 minutes. So it's based on the organization, based on the efficiency of it. So obviously, when you seek your project manager, they will say that you have to tell me as a DevOps engineer. How will you tell? Based on the efficiency. Based on the efficiency and all the previous runs, you'll say minimum I could see that an average scale that is running for 1 hour 30 minutes. Uh, that means let's mention 1 hour 45 minutes as our timeout case. So this things is what you will get questions with. Okay, you will be getting questions on the pool. So as I said, in which agent pool you wanted to select. Again, in pool, that's what it comes back. In pool, if you see, we have subsections, right? When you're writing in job, you have to write at subsections. Just like in services, they write a subsection. That's how you write a subsection. You mention the pool name that would be working because for a self-hosted agent, and if it demands, then you have to give pool and then you have to give name, giving a space, and then give the pool name, agent pool name, and then you have to mention demands, and then you go back to the again to the same spacing of this pool. Okay. Any questions here? And whatever steps you mention, that's what we write it. I'm going in a very high level. This is because in interview, I always seen people only ask these questions, some questions regarding the pipeline. They really don't get into the right. How do you write a YAML pipeline? Let me know and all that. You really have to go and get in the flow of understanding this. How do we run a YAML pipeline? You don't need to run an YAML pipeline when there's a trigger. Automatically, when there is a change, then it will automatically trigger that. So here, if I say look for any trigger option, so you can mention multiple branches. What if I have two, three branches? How do I trigger it? So if you're mentioning main develop, for main develop, the same pipeline will be YAML pipeline will be triggered. And what else? So you can mention here also. Um, as we go, there is so much to it. I can talk about this paths and tags. I'm not sure how much you'll understand, but they will get to a question where they'll ask like in this specific file only, in this specific file path in my health.web movie modules, if there is any change in this particular file or in this particular folder, uh, then only you have to trigger it. They will say, what will you do in that kind of case? Usually, here I already explained that you go here and here, where is that path? So during the time of creation only it will ask like this, that one. So when I click on new pipeline, click on classic editor, report, checkout, don't syntax, error page, and AKS, pipeline, options. Here it is. Add only link work, add to specific branches. Okay, number, schedule, triggers. Here it is. When I click on continuous enable trigger, here if you're seeing path filters. So I'll specifically mention the exact path where it is. So only during that point of time the trigger will happen, the specific branch, and if there is any and if there is any trigger in that specific file path. The same thing you can also mention for a job the same way in YAML pipeline also. Okay, and that's where they're trying to talk about it. Okay, the path and all that. So I'm not getting uh, into that more clear. I'm not getting into that path clear. So include and exclude and all that. So that's about a YAML pipeline. Now let me get into the discussion about the pipeline itself. So I've seen this specific.
Rakesh, one question.
Mhm.
So in the path filters, if I have to mention that particular file, I'll just mention that file name, right?
Mm. No, 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 no. You have to give that exact path, the folder path.
For example, view model. So should I like mention src slash?
Yes.
Okay.
So if I'm going inside a specific file here,
Oh yeah, got it. From the
I have
top.
to I have to exactly mention the path the same way it is there here, the path. If you see here,
Yeah, correct.
I have to exactly mention that
Okay,
path.
okay.
Now let's understand this task here. Now if I see I'm trying to replace tokens in app setting.json. What is replace tokens? I already mentioned when you are converting variables in the uh, file. You can get an understanding about it here on anything. How to use replace tokens. So replace tokens is an extension that can be used in Azure DevOps. The task end of the day, which provides the possibility to replace tokens in code files with variable values. So here it mentioned clearly that you're in the code files, nothing but in a file. You take a file and you change you replace to the exact variables values which in that token. So how do you recognize which is a token here? So you are mentioning the token pattern. What would if if any text is following similar style, then that will be the token. So here you're saying that underscore and any value and again underscore. That means that whatever is inside is the variable name. So if you look at here, app settings.json, right, is the first task. So if I look at where is the app settings.json, I mentioned here in which directory I have to go and look at. I have to go into the path of src myhealth.web. So I'll go here, myhealth.web and app settings.json. Now in this one, so in this we are writing specifically connection string so that the application can connect with the database and may do respect to read and write CRUD operations, whatever it is. Now here, if you look here, we said that the pattern is underscore any value, and again it goes with underscore. So here there are the app replace token will find the three tokens because this is one token end of the day. This is one token. This is one token. And if you see SQL Server, if we go into variables, we have SQL Server, same variable. So it will replace that value. Now the same thing, SQL user, we have SQL user, we have SQL password, we have SQL password. So in your organization, do we really have variables defined like this? For sensitive ones? No. We will take a specific task called Azure keyword. And in Azure keyword, we will mention to download secrecy. We will click on this and this will download secrets. And once they download the secrets, in which will be downloaded in the pipeline. Okay. Now you will write basically a script which will make by those secrets into, so you will say make secrets available for the whole job. If you select it, then whole job it will be available. I don't select usually this one. So it will be only immediately available for the next task to run. So run this task before execution, expose the secrets to all tasks in the job and not just tasks that follows this one. So whatever, if I mention here and if I enable it for all till all the job, it will available. I don't want that one. So then usually I'll leave it as it is. That's how organization follows. They'll not check this, but because the next one will be copy the those secrets and make it as a variables. So Azure DevOps is a bit smart in that whatever variables they are making from the secrets, that will not be visible for anyone unless you go inside in the script. You don't if you mention it to be pushed into a text file and all that, only then it will be pushed into a text content. Otherwise it's not possible to read it. Okay, so I'll not get into that facts at this point of time. That's unnecessary in your organization. They'll use this keyword to download the secrets, and they'll use one more task called script, CLI script. See, or script is a task. So you'll write one script which will create uh, pipeline variables. So how do you create a pipeline variables? You can use whatever you wanted. Doesn't really matter. I'm not getting to the subject at this point of time. But you will just mention. So this is how script you will mention to make it as a variable. Okay. That will automatically will have one value and all that. So why am I saying this? So when you are going to tomorrow replace a token in your organization, when you are going to do, you will not be finding sensitive variables to defined here. You'll only find which resource group the key vault is, which what is the key vault name, and what is the subscription ID. These are the things which you will know. The rest things you will not be knowing anything. Any questions here? Why did I bring this topic? Hope you got me. Because we are just hard coding here, which is not at all recommended. And once the replace tokens replace it, values will in this file, values will be what did they do? They are taking they will take this YAML file specifically. This one they are leaving it as it is, so that when the build is happening, automatically it will go and take it. But this file will be replaced with values here mentioning the SQL server and SQL user and password. You can't be hardcode here itself because this application might be the SQL Server name will change username. We don't want that to be happening. So this is the better methods. Now the other one is replace token for another file. Can't we mention for all the files here itself? We can do it, but we have to. They are in different directories, root directories. That's why we have to mention in different tasks. If you have multiple files, you would have mentioned here itself that files if they're in the same path, but as they're in different path, you defer that. Okay, so here you didn't mention in root directory. So it will not go into anywhere other than the root directory of the repository here itself. And this is where this root directory starts. So if it will start going under looking for a file name called MHC AKS. So if you can mention even the pattern saying that star-aks.yaml. So whatever it will find, it will start looking for that. So here MHC AKS.yaml. If I go and look for what is the replace token pattern again, the same. So it will start looking for is there any token that way. So here it is underscore then the whatever file this one and then underscore. Do we have a variable name with ACR? Yes, we have it. So I'll replace that. Okay. So that's what happened in this replace token. Now let's understand Docker Compose. So what is a different? So guys, you have to understand that I previously explained as a Docker file. Now we are getting into a concept called Docker Compose. So Docker Compose and file were different in some matters. When you wanted to build a project, okay, you wanted to build an image, you use a Docker file. Uh, okay, so and for Docker Compose, Docker Compose you will specifically tell how should I run that. Okay, you will and what tasks have to be done exactly. So in Docker Compose, you will define series of steps which have to be done when you run it as a container, and it will not make it run anymore. Once it runs, once it is complete, the container will stop. So Docker Compose here specifically tells what you should be doing. Okay. Uh, so in Docker Compose, the first thing it started going is started looking at Docker Compose CI build.yaml, the root directory. So I'll go here and Docker Compose CI build. So it's nothing but configuration build YAML if we try to understand. So here in Docker file, we have remember, from CMD, there are commands in Docker file, right? Hope you remember it. Go into this one. In Docker file, I have this kind of commands. In Docker Compose, you won't be seeing all those. Docker Compose, this is how you see. You say that take an image and run it as a container and all that. So here you're saying that this is this is just a the initial one version. What type of how do when you're running it as version and services you'll say uh, first the CI build. You're naming it as CI build, and here you mentioned take an image. So you're saying from Docker registry take an image called ASP.NET Core build. Okay, so that means that it has this repository, it has the what do you say, an ASP.NET Core installed in that container, okay, in that image. So if you take it as an image and run it, it will have ASP, you can run in that ASP.NET web application. That's it. Okay. Now, once you take that image and run it as a container, first things which you have to do is assign a volume. So your current, the volume, so whatever you're planning to store in your current working directory, okay, it is actually inside this SRC, is what they are trying to say. And the next is the working directory is src/src. And so just if you, I just wanted to exactly tell there Docker Compose. Here looks where the host directory is and app is a directory for the target container. So here they're mentioning that this is what you are seeing in container, and this is what you are seeing as your current working directory of your current this one. So the entire current working directory which you're going to take. Here it is mentioned the current working directory will be SRC. So in this one, you're going to keep it. And whatever slash SRC is, um, so whatever when there will be a particular path of slash SRC, and that's where you store things. When you are going to build an image, then there will be, sorry, when you going and running .NET build an application, uh, then there will be DLL files which will be generated out of it. Now, where do you want it to store it? You want it to store it under the /src. Okay, so that's where they're trying to talk about it. Okay, this under this /src, you want it to store it. And here, if you see, when you run it as a container, okay, as what they're trying to say is when the uh, take the slash bin slash is nothing but you run this command, whatever is being mentioned in bash. And as this is an image which was built and it is runs on it runs in a terminal point of view. So here you're saying .NET restore, .NET space restore space uh, first the SLN. So all the dependencies first will be executed. Once that is done, the next one and means this is the first command which you have to run, and then the next command which you have to run is .NET publish. Okay, and that means you're packaging the entire application. So when you're doing that .NET build, so this is a solution file you start with. That's what I explained in the start of the session today, that when you take an SLN file, you don't build each one saying .prg, sprg and all that, .c, sprosh. You don't go individually build each one. So there might be multiple applications, but end of the day, all will be linked to the S solution file. That comes as a developer point of view. You don't need to be worried all these things. I'm just showing you that they take an SLN file and you just do .NET publish. Why are we not doing .NET build? Because publish is in fact doing the same thing. It's going to build the project and it is going to, here you are mentioning output. So whatever publishing has to be done, it should be put in .obj. So current working directory is src. Under that, they'll create a folder called object and their Docker and publish. Under that, the whatever the DLL files will be there, it will be put in that. And next is this is a release. So you're just uh, so when you do the publish, this is one of the parameter which you will also send. So just making it as a release one. So this is when here, why am I explaining this? So in this task, when I say that Docker compose ci yaml build, they are going to run it as a container. In the container ASP.NET, they are going to attach the volume and all that, and they ran this command. Now, once they run this command, it generated an output in this directory. Okay, and it is not stored in this repository. This entire thing is running on that machine, virtual machine agent here, which we selected. So in that, you will see uh, the what do you say, the this one got generated, the DLL files. That's why it was said build specifically. That's why they mentioned build, CI build. The next one is we right now have to make the DLL files as an image. So here, if you see again, the file name change docker compose.yaml, and this is the right one. This is the bigger one. Okay. Now what happened? Again, it is a Docker Compose. Docker Compose, I said that it will take and run that as a file. And here we are saying that, sorry, run it as a container. Now here you are saying that the service is myhealth.web. Then you take, you are making an image, myhealth.web, and you're saying build. You're saying to build, so it will build it. So you're saying here, go under .src.myhealth.web and look for Docker file. It will go and look for Docker file under this path, myhealth.web. Now here in this Docker, so Docker file is where we use to build image, right? So here you're saying that when it runs as a container, it's going to make that, you have to understand two things here, which is bit confusing, but it will take some time to understand. But you have to keep doing it and keep doing it, and you'll understand slowly. Docker compose YAML. Here you mentioned what is the image name, and once it started executing the Docker file, the image file which gets generated will be the image name which you mentioned here. Because once what happens in Docker file, it executes, it generates a mock environment, and in that mock environment, it will follow the series of steps which you have mentioned here. And out of that, then how did you run? How did you run that command? Docker build -t. Then we gave the build image name, and then we gave the directory and all that. Here you don't need to mention all that. Here you mentioned where do you have to go? Where do you find the Docker file? You said that in my health.web. It went inside it and it took the Docker file, and here you give the image name. Now it will start doing the series of commands. First, it will take the uh, from this particular repository. So here it's previously we are using official images. Now this time we are using private repository. Sorry, in the it was repository in Docker Hub registry, and there you're going and choosing in that whatever the images they have are storing it. So this is a public registry. In that public registry, they made it public. It's accessible for everyone. That's why it worked. Otherwise, it would have failed the pipelines. And they took the ASP.NET Core image, and then we made that as a source, and the working directory /app. So did I mention anywhere here /app? No. Okay. So when you are running the image, you are making the working directory as /app, and you're exposing 80 port. You run the you run that image as a container, Docker run, and you do it automatically. It will expose the port 80, and the working directory will be /app and the source. Here, copy will be what is copy? Whatever files we have in object.obj.dockers publish. If you remember in the build dockers, yeah, where is it? Docker CI build YAML. If you remember this, what did we do? We try to store the DLL files in that obj docker publish. So here it went, so it copied all the files from the publish folder. Now whenever you're starting this image, it was going to mention .NET myhealthweb.dll. It's nothing but you're running the application in it. Okay. So I said you right, DLL files will generate when you are going to do a publish. And if you see myhealthweb.dll, you look for myhealthweb.dll because you are building in when you're building this .NET SLN file, the application you are building is myhealth.web. So you will find myhealthweb.dll in that. So once that is done, this if you go into this pipeline, we built an image which is myhealth.web. Now you see here uh, uh, that push. What is the difference between these three? If you see here, the action is run services. In run services, you're just running this Docker Compose YAML, which is a different file. For this both this task, the file is same. So here you're asking to build it. So if there is any issue in the build, it will let us know. Okay. And in the push, here we are checking once the image has been built, we are pushing that to a repository. Then here we are adding the tags, image tags and all that. So based on the image ID, and here we mentioned, uh, here we are mentioning here this one project name. So you can mention this. If you are mentioning this, that means whatever is the repository name, that is what usually the image will be defined if project is used for default naming of images and containers. But I believe you already mentioned here myhealth.web. So you will see myhealth.web as the image name. Let's see that one later on. Mm, Where is this? Yeah. So you are pushing the image to the repository. Okay. Which repository? ACR, Azure Container Registry. Okay. And here you mentioned, if you look at it in registry, if you're going into registry, you're sending into that registry the image name. And then log services. Why do we need log services? Because lot of builds will be generated, right? Okay. Every time whenever developer is pushing, the pipeline will execute and a new Docker file image will be generated. Now, how will, because of this numerous times the pipelines will run, at least the pipelines will keep running. What I've seen in specific environments, there will be at least 30, 40 machines running as a DevOps agents. And sometimes the organization will say that this is the amount of things only we can give at this point of time, and developers will keep waiting, or they'll push their email, their pipeline content in the early mornings itself at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, so that they are running the pipelines beforehand by before than anyone. Okay, so the because the pipelines might run for 1 hour that or 45 minutes or 2 hours, they want their first commits to happen so that their job is done. So that means in a day there will be at least some 50 commits if there are 100 developers or 200 developers. Now at that point of time, like in 1 year, like lot of things would have generated, images and all that. To ensure that the proper digest will be generated, means the proper configuration. So you're locking that, saying that this is the latest version, this was the previous versions and all that. So it's just a metadata related to an image. So you're just making it aware in terms of image. So it's not a very big deal. Just giving you that why are we using log services even when it's not a big deal. Uh, then here I have to copy some files. Why am I copying these files? If I go into the release one specifically, have to here uh, execute backpack packages. When I wanted to execute backpack packages, I need to have the backpack file, right? And all. So I have to copy backpack files from this one. So here I mentioned from which the folder. When I didn't mention the source folder, it will take the root folder. So root folder is this one. This root folder, it is going to copy backpack. This is the .backpack, so it is going to copy that file into which one? Into which one? Into the staging directory. So wherever this is running exactly into that current working directory, it will copy it. And then we have even mch.yaml. So if you see here, we replace the tokens. So this is for AKS deployment. So you wanted this YAML deployment to happen, where it is what does mc.yaml file will have. Where is it? Here it is. So we are specifically saying here, how do we have to run the uh, containers in the AKS? So there are two things when you are running in your manifest files. Please remember that one is deployment, one is services. Okay. So deployment usually will be load balancers and the primary ones, and services are nothing but the applications which will be running behind the scenes. Uh, mm. But there's a huge difference between a service and deployment, which they'll ask you guys in interview, which I forgot. Azure Kubernetes, Kubernetes deployment with service. And once you explain this one, the next question which comes is what is ingress? If they ask you what is service first deployment, then the next question which you will get is ingress. Or if they ask you what is ingress, the next question which will come is service first deployment. Trust me, I've seen encountered n number of times. If they ask this one, they're asking that one, or they're asking that, or they're asking. So they'll ask you what is ingress, or they'll ask you what is service and how do you deploy and all that. So here, a deployment is responsible for keeping set of pods running. A service is enabling network access to a set of pods. It's not a right explanation. It's right explanation, but it's not a well-defined explanation. I'm looking for the right word which I have in my mind, but I'm not able to keep it in words. Deployment use cases include running multiple instances of an application, uh, scaling the number of instances of up and updating every runtime instance, rolling back all the test running instances of an application to another version. So with service, what I can say is with service, you can start playing. So usually services will be your the backend applications and how do I keep it? Your load balancer. These services will not change. Okay, they like load balancer, public IP will not change. They'll be very specific. But deployments, when you do the deployment, it runs as an instance and it can run in as in a container. It will run in a container itself. But when you do a service, when you're deploying in a sorry, when you're deploying a service in manifest files and writing, so there will be what do you say? They'll exist till the Kubernetes is going and running. So they'll have standard values and they will not keep changing. That I will say. And in terms of deployment, it will change whenever the metadata involved in it. So if I look at it, one is MHC back, which is nothing but the backend, is one type of the deployment. So if you see here, it is ended. That's what it means. This is whatever you're seeing is for deployment. And what is running in backend? In backend, MHC back is nothing but the backend. In the backend, here the specifications it is mentioned. This is metadata. Metadata is nothing but the data related to the pod which is running. In the pod which you are seeing here at this point of time is one replica you are going to run, and that is the app name is MHC back, and in the specifications you are mentioning. Uh, the image you are taking is Redis image. So this is an official image because you don't mention in a container any registry like that, repository, anything. So it's going to look for the official image, Redis, and it is going to uh, run that. And you mentioned that as run it as a container name called MHC back. So I said that a pod we can have multiple containers in it. Now here we only mentioned one container to be running, that is MHC back, and that is Redis. And you're saying that run it in the container 6379. That is it. And this is a deployment. So you can see here, as I said, deployments when you're running these containers, you if this any issue comes, you will just rerun it and the container inside IPs, all that will be changing. But in service, you will not change that. You will make it very specific. So here you said that type is cluster IP. Specifications, you mentioned cluster IP address for MHC back, and you said it should be port is 6379. So again, you this is kind of an ultimatum. Services like deployment, it's going to uh, based on the container if it can rerun and all that. So if you see services only, there will be for again for load balancer. for applications you will use deployment. Please remember that. I explained when I was opening this manifest file, I explained it reversely that service is for applications, and what is meant by service applications? The images which you take while you run it as a in pod as a container, that is nothing but it you will do it for deployments. Okay, here if you see for the services, you don't have anything like image and all that. Okay, only for the deployments you see image names. So you see deployment here, and if you go into specifications of it, you will see an image name. Okay, even for a deployment here, you see an image name. Okay, so there are some specific things. So I'm not getting into huge detail because that's a Kubernetes concepts as we go and keep understanding. Because they'll ask you one question that are you aware of would write a manifest files. So it's not a one session or a 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes where I can talk about how do you write a manifest files. It comes from an experience. Only some things which I can explain you is you will mention in kind. So when I wanted, what is kind here? Then you'll say that for applications when we are wanted to run it as containers, we will write deployment. When we wanted to have load balancer or IPs and all that, where they will prefer uh, service in kind. And in specifications, we exactly tell what to be done. How many replicas should be, how many as pods it should run. So if you see get pods, when I say kubectl, kubectl, get space pods, it will say what all pods are running. The pods are nothing but the names which you'll see MHC back, and then you'll see one by one, two by one, two by two, or one by two, and all that. That means how many replicas you set to create, how many were created, and how many are exactly running. So you'll get to know all the status of all that based on this. And some more things which I'll explain here is specifications. I said containers, you will see image name and what is a container name it should be running like. So in container, you can have multiple, sorry, in a pod, you can have multiple containers. That's where you can see here. Uh, mm, so here you said name as Redis. So here I think somewhere we named Redis. We name the image is Redis, but we named it as Redis here. And the application is going to take the inputs from this Redis. So I have to really understand the manifest file for this specifically here because it's just not that easy. Uh, just I can read it in 5 minutes. But some things which I'll explain is the AT port of the container has been exposed. So it is being exposed for the here load balancer. So that's why when yesterday I did kubectl get services, I got the load balancer, which is MHC front, which is running. And that one, when I looked at the external IP of that load balancer, I copied it and I pasted it. And as it's an HTTP, not an HTTPS, but just an HTTP, I just will, the request will go to the AT port and I got the web page. So this one, this MHC, AKS, and Darkfact packages have been copied and that has been put into artifact. So it was put into an artifact named deploy. So here, when I go into pipeline, uh, I took the latest build of it, but when I click on adding, uh, choose this one, and you pushed into a drop location, which is nothing but so that it will consume that one from this drop location. So here, when I select this artifact and and I'm choosing the build pipeline, unless this has been pushed into these files have been pushed into the artifact called deploy, unless then it won't be in a position these pipelines to consume those files whatever are there in that artifact. So it pushed these two files Why am I saying this two files only? Whatever you see in staging directory, this one is files are been in staging directory. And if you see whatever files which are there in the staging directory, you're pushing into an artifact called deploy. And when you look into this one, the it's going to the current working directory which is going to run is nothing but has the whatever generated from this artifact, because you mentioned here uh, the artifact is nothing but whatever was generated from this pipeline. That's why they'll say here for how long do you wanted it to the previous runs to be storing that artifact and all that. So latest artifact will be stored, but the older artifacts will be removed if at all we are what do you say, if you don't have it anymore. Uh, Retention. So there is in project settings, I believe. So these are all extended topics, which just giving some ideas whenever we are going to say days to keep artifacts and symbols here. We see. So this is an artifact which is storing that files and all that. So there will be only for some days you will see it, that files inside that. So after that, if you wanted, you have to first again run this, generate the artifact, and again, because it's a storage, and obviously Google, the Microsoft can't give it for free. Uh, One is for DACPAC, which is executing the SQL, and the other one is for deploying the in AKS. And once they deployed it, uh, manifest files. That means they're running that containers, the entire cluster environment in the AKS. The next thing is take the image from AKS. Okay, so where is that image? That image is in Azure Container Registry. If you remember, we push that image into the registry, and if you look here, we have in ACR is nothing but, so if you see the file is nothing but the container registry name and then myhealth.web, because in Docker YAML compose file we mention myhealth.web, and then the build ID, which is nothing but the colon build ID is tag name, right? So if you remember when I was doing that build, the build image tag is nothing but the latest tag is nothing but the build.build ID. So that's how the pipelines were designed. So this is entirely generated by demo generated. Now, how do you practice this? You have to go and replicate this entire thing. So you create a pipeline, okay, get to know what is happening on this. So play with it to get an idea about it. So these things I shown you, right? You go into Azure DevOps Labs.com and you click on this multi-container and you click on Azure DevOps Demo Generator and you click on sign in and it will automatically go ahead and generate this entire environment which you're seeing. Only some changes which you have to do, which I have done in the terms of troubleshooting, because only then it will run. And I used for this pipeline, I used Ubuntu, Ubuntu. For this one, I have to use Windows because it's a SQL package which is running on Windows. So that's why I mentioned here Windows machine. For this, I can run it on a Ubuntu also. So there is no problem with it. So I believe I explained this scenario. So we are done for this one. So in next session, we are going to uh, deploy using Terraform this entire environment. So if you remember, we have ran these commands to create things, right? Container registry and the Azure Kubernetes cluster and all that. So we are going to use Terraform to build it, and I'm going to integrate that to this pipelines. I'll create one more release pipeline. Uh, which specifically talks about creating a release, and once that pipeline is being built, then automatically I will mm, trigger this release. So that's the whole point, guys. We'll do that. So I'll build that CI/CD and all that. So in the previous scenario, if you remember, what did I do? I deployed a .NET application into an Azure app service where I build a continuous CI/CD pipeline. I build Now I am using the same scenario, but I'm invoking Terraform, and I'm going to configure Terraform. And in this Terraform, I am going to utilize the concepts which I wanted to talk as ARM. I'm going to talk about as your key vault. I'm going to integrate all these tasks in the Terraform pipelines, and I'll include PowerShell task also. So whenever any new items which are getting created, in the pull request, it has to get updated that Terraform is creating so and so new resources, or it is going and modifying so and so new resources, or it is going and deleting so and so new resources, so and so resources which are existing, so that a reviewer will able to understand it and will able to accordingly complete the pull request. So I have something in mind which I think which will be a good thing to go and explain in interview, that that is my project and all that, mixing all this which I have just explained, which will make you confident as such to know how an environment looks like, and at least a mimic. Say, because the only problem, the challenge which you'll see in a mimic versus a real production is the quality and a bit more integrations you might see. The quantity, like in terms of agents in an agent pool, in terms of number of pipelines which are being triggered every day, in terms of number of releases which are being triggered, number of documents which you document in Wiki, number of dashboards you look at updated, number of work items which those are only the changes, but it's end of the day same to same which we are trying to do.